Listening?
That'd be great.
Oh, somebody left the back door open of the van. All right. Why'd she say this area was so unique last night? What'd she say about it? What'd she say?
It's a bunch of ecosystems coming. Turkeys!
It's a
Turkeys!
bunch of ecosystems coming together.
And it had little babies.
Baby
cool.
turkeys. That's what it is.
Oh, baby turkeys are ugly.
Where?
They just went into that seed. All right, so here's what's happening in this area. Okay, we came through the Sandhills Prairie, coming down. You remember? Through the rolling woods. I mean, through the rolling terrain there. That's a unique prairie all by itself. Okay, so there's a Sandhills Prairie area in this area, and you find that hardly anywhere else in the world. Look up on those hillsides up there. See through the trees, and you see that big flat hill before you go up to the top of the hill. See the real top hill, and then you see the next hill down. Well, that hill on that side of the river, that has a different kind of prairie on that area right there, and that's called that's a midgrass prairie. It's found like in western United States. It has grama grass and blue grama and all this mid-range kind of grass. It's different than the Sandhills Prairie. So there's a second prairie type right there. Now another third prairie type is if you go down right along the river and walk the river's edge. Then there's still remnants, particularly a little bit farther west of here, of really tall grass prairie. And that was what was in all of eastern Nebraska where we came from. All right? Back 200 years ago, there was some grasses so high that you couldn't ride your horse through and you'd get lost in them, they said. Lewis and Clark followed buffalo trails through the grass. How would you like to do that? Ride your horse through a buffalo trail or walking through a grassy trail and then maybe meet a plains grizzly bear or a big bull bison or something. All right? So down along the river's edge, there's this remnant of this third type of prairie called tall grass prairie. So what are the three types of prairies again? This way?
Sandhills.
What? No, this one out here? Sandhills up on the ridge? Mid-grass, okay. And then
tall grass.
And tall grass. Okay. Now, the forest types, there's three of those. You see on this ridge side here, and everything that's burnt up there. Well, what kind of trees are those?
Pine.
No, right up here. Right up here. What are they?
Pine.
Ponderosa pine. And if you go towards Long Pine, where we stopped and stayed, that's as far as the Ponderosa pine go to the east. So from Long Pine, where we stopped and waited in the creek, everything from this direction on along these ridge tops have Ponderosa pine. That's it. Now these kind of trees right here, aren't these deciduous trees? Yes. Don't they lose their leaves?
Yep.
All right. And they go from where we live, aren't they? Lots of stuff along the Missouri River and Niobrara River. Don't you have all these kind of trees? You just go a little bit farther west of here to Valentine, Nebraska, 30 some miles away, and that starts running out. So you have a deciduous forest here, and you have a Ponderosa pine forest overlapping. One coming from the west, one coming from the east. All right? And then when we go today to Smith Falls, right? Aren't we going there this afternoon?
Yeah.
When you go there, you're going to see something totally different. There's these white trunk trees. There's birch and aspen, and they are remnants of when this was really, really cold and wet, back when there were glaciers here. Matter of fact, it was a glacier that formed the Niobrara River. I'll get to that in a second. But so right along that area, along Smith Falls, and you'll see just a few in this area, you'll find birch trees, and they're almost always on this side of the river. What side is this? What side are we on?
South.
We're on the south side of the river. Okay? Because here's what happened. Here's what happened several million years ago. All right? This glacier came in from the north. Let's say here was where the Niobrara River is. It wasn't there. Okay? It looked like this. Okay? So this glacier came in from the north, and what glaciers do, they act like giant bulldozers. They're just giant blocks of ice, and they push all these rocks and stuff in front of them, right? And it stopped about right here. all right? And then it receded. And when it recedes, what do glaciers have to do to recede, to leave?
Melt.
They melt, right?
Oh.
And so it left this Niobrara River, all right? That's part of this Niobrara River here is because the river melted. And it left this big glacial pit for it to do. Now, as it was bulldozing this area in, all right, if you look right along this area, and I don't think you can see it right here, we'll see it a little bit later, there's, as you go down the river here, it's about right here where this wet is. See where it's wet? Mm-hmm. There's a little layer of clay. So when all the water falls down here in the sand hills, it hits that clay layer. And what about water and clay?
What do you stick?
What do you make pottery out of?
Water and clay.
Water and clay. Does water go through clay very well?
No.
No. So when all the water hits the sand hills here, it runs down and it hits a clay layer, and it doesn't go any farther, and guess what?
So the water
It runs off, and it runs downhill, and guess which direction's downhill, folks? This way, right here.
Niobrara.
So on the south side of the river, on this side of the river, all the water that hits here, most of it flows downhill and drains into the Niobrara River. Now, what did this glacier do? To the north side of the river, what do you think it did? That big bulldozer. It ripped that clay layer up. There's no clay layer that's below the soil over there. So what does that mean?
Sucks it up.
When all the water hits, what's it do?
Goes right down.
It just keeps on going down. So you don't see any little streams hardly at all. There's a few bigger streams, but there's not all these little waterfalls and stuff on that side of the river. That side of the river's dry, is when it compares to the water. This has all these little springs and stuff. And those paper birch like springs to have their roots in. All right? So that's why this area is so unique, because it not only has, it has that paper birch forest that makes a third forest type. So what were the three forest types again? The one coming in from the east?
Pine.
No, forest, trees. Deciduous, these things right here. What's coming in from the west, up on the hills? Ponderosa pine. And you haven't seen the third type yet. What's that?
Birch.
The birch and the aspen. All right, there's actually aspen in Nebraska. If you go to Minnesota, there's aspen. It's called quaking aspen. No, it's called big-tooth aspen. And if you go to Colorado and Montana, you get quaking aspen or trembling aspen. The leaves kind of shudder in the wind. This one that's here is neither one. It's probably the parent of those two. It was probably there was aspen here, and it split off into two species because it was separated for so long that the eastern aspen is different than the western aspen. And then there's a third type of aspen that's this old ancient aspen that's here. All right? So that's really what's really strange about this place, is because there's these 6 different ecosystems overlapping. And if you have 6 different plant systems overlapping, guess what also you have that I like?
Animals.
Birds. You get birds and insects coming in from the west. You get birds and insects coming in from the east. You get birds and insects coming in from the south that like the sandhills prairie. You got some birds that like the ponderosa pine. And all those birds are here. That's make this place one of the richest places on earth for having biodiversity, for all these weird animals coming together. And matter of fact, they did studies, because if you looked at Nebraska 200 years ago, if we were standing right here 200 years ago, these trees probably wouldn't have been here. Those trees probably wouldn't have been here. There might have been a few pines. Yeah, the pines probably would have been here, but everything else probably burned up because the Native Americans set lots of fires for driving wildlife. Then they had range fires all the time, and all these trees were probably burnt back. All right? There wouldn't be much for trees here. It'd be mostly grassland. So if you think you're a bird and you're a robin, and I'm flying from Iowa, am I going to fly out here? Why or why not?
No trees.
There's no trees. So if you're a robin or a barn swallow, you think you would have lived here 200 years ago? Were there any barns out here?
Probably
No.
not.
Were there any trees for birds to live in?
No.
Not much.
Not very many. So the birds didn't hear, except for along this Niobrara River. It acted, because it goes all the way to Wyoming. So it acted as a corridor. It acted as a place that the eastern birds could meet the western birds. Most of the time, the Great Plains, Nebraska, Kansas, was this big open grassland that birds didn't fly across. It wasn't until people came, and what did we start doing? Built a town here, planted trees. 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 I remember 30 years ago, a cardinal made a big scene because it showed up in Denver, Colorado. 30 years ago, a cardinal. Do we see cardinals here? We saw cardinals yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Well, look at what cardinals can do now. Could cardinals cross this 200 years ago?
Probably not.
Probably not. They wouldn't fly across because there was no trees here. But now, can't they jump from town to town to town, set up a population here, migrate a little bit over here, and now cardinals are common in Denver. All right, because we've created this breach of the Great Plains. We've created this stepping stone that birds can jump across from the west to the east, and from the east to the west, and from the west to the east. And that's what happens. That's what's always been happening here because of this area along the river. So there's unique bird species here. All right, that's ecology in a nutshell of this place. Okay, that's a fast 10-minute lecture.
How far east and west on the Niobrara does this